Whales have been hunted by humans for thousands of years all across the planet. I can't imagine how people back in the day were able to hunt such a large animal in the middle of the ocean with such limited resources and technology. Whale voyages were dirty and extremely dangerous, with some voyages lasting several years and thousands of miles. Injuries and death were not uncommon. So, how did they do it? And why did they go through all this trouble to hunt whales? We'll get to the how later. Let's focus on the why. In the late 18th century, whaling began to grow, due in large part to the start of the Industrial Revolution, as machines and factories began to replace hand production. Whale oil, obtained from the blubber of whales, was in great demand as both a lubricant to ensure the smooth operation of all these new machines and factories, and also as an illuminant to light the homes and streets in the 18th and 19th centuries. Whales were exploited for a variety of other goods and materials, including soap, perfume, clothing, fishing hooks, and whale meat, just to name a few. So, how in the world did these whalers go about hunting the planet's largest living creatures? Early whalers caught small coastal whales that came to breed in bays near the coast. Some communities only processed dead whales that washed up on the beaches. As time went on and the whaling industry expanded, whalers went further out into the ocean looking for bigger whales, which dramatically increased the risk. The industry reached its peak in the mid 1800s, so let's take it back to the 1800s and see how in the world these crazy whalers were able to catch and kill these massive creatures. Step 1. You need a crew.
And you're going to need a crew as nuts as you are.
Typically, there were three types of whalemen: those who hope to own their own ship one day, those seeking adventure, and those who were running from something or someone. Step number 2, you have to find the whales. As whales became more scarce in the North Atlantic, the American whaling fleet, based on the East Coast, operated hundreds of ships in the 1800s, had to travel to the South Atlantic, Pacific, and Indian Ocean. Crewmen would take turns scanning for whales from sunrise to sunset each day. As you can imagine, there were countless hours of boredom just staring into the massive ocean. The whalemen would climb up the mast 100 feet above deck to the crow's nest, where he would look for a whale's tail, the spout of a vapor plume caused by the whale's breath. Under ideal conditions, a lookout might spot a whale 8 miles away. The lookout would yell, "There she blows," to alert the rest of the crew. Whalers hunted all different species of whales, but sperm whales produced a type of waxy oil called spermaceti, considered to be more valuable than the oil produced by other whales. Step 3. Harpooning the whale. Step 2 was easy compared to Step 3. You found a whale, now you have to somehow harpoon it. Rowboats or whale boats would be launched. You couldn't row too fast since the whales have acute hearing, so it was important to approach quietly as to not scare them into diving or swimming away. Usually there were 6 men in a boat. As the whale boat neared the whale, the harpooner would set up. The harpoon, also known as a whale iron, would penetrate the whale's blubber and secure the whale to the whaleboat. The harpoon was not designed to kill the whale, just tire it out. After the harpooner caught the whale, the creature would either dive deep, turn on the boat, or take off swimming. All bad options. A rope attached to the harpoon kept the boat near the thrashing whale. The jaws or tail of a 50-ton whale could smash the boat and send the crew tumbling into the water. If the whale decided to dive deeper into the ocean, the crew would let the line run out so as to not be dragged down with it. A seaman caught in the line could be dragged to his death. If the whale swam away, it would tow the whaleboat behind it. In the U.S., this was called a Nantucket sleigh ride. Some whales can swim on the surface at more than 20 miles per hour, and drag crews for miles. The crew's goal was to tire out the whale without being carried too far from the ship and getting lost. Step 4. Killing the whale. When the whale finally tired, the crew pulled on the line to bring the whale close to the boat. Once the whale was really close, a whaler would have to strike the whale in the heart or lung. At this point, the whale would typically beat the water with its tail until it died. Step 5. Securing the whale to the ship. After hours of exhausting work, the crew still had to tow the massive whales back to the whale ship, which was probably the most physically demanding part of the process. It was important to row fast because once you killed the whale and bloodied the water, sharks weren't far behind. Just one other thing for the crew to deal with. The whales would be fastened to the right side of the ship with heavy chains. Step 6. Processing the whale. Once secured to the side of the whaling ship, the crew would begin the process of converting the whale into workable parts. First, the whale blubber, or the outer fat layer, would be carved into long strips and tossed on deck of the ship. Other crew members would chop the blubber into smaller pieces and toss them into the kettles used to boil the blubber for oil. Other parts of the whale were salvaged as well, so they could be processed into usable products. This was another dangerous step, since this stage called for some of the whalers to hang off the side of the ship to process the whale, and also all the surfaces became very slippery from the whale parts. Anyone falling into the water either drowned or were eaten by the sharks already attracted by the whale blood. The smell that would come from the kettles burning the whale blubber was dreadful. There's an old saying, they say you can smell a whaleboat before you could see it. This whole process could take several days depending on the size of the whale, skill of the crew, and let's not forget, the weather. Can you imagine trying to do all this in rough seas and bad weather? Not all pursuits ended with a whale death. Crews sometimes chased for hours and hours and never getting close enough to their prey. Occasionally the harpoon would come loose or the boats would get overturned and destroyed. Whaling could be a profitable business, but not for the crew. Most of the money went to the owners or captains. The crew only received a small share of the profits, if there were any. Whaling started to decline towards the end of the 19th century, particularly when the discovery of petroleum in 1859 meant whale oil was no longer needed to make candles. The introduction of vegetable oil, gas lamps, and eventually electric lights in 1879 all contributed to this decline. With the introduction of new technology in the 20th century, the whaling industry picked up some steam. Floating ship factories were built as whale oil and flesh became increasingly important due to the food rationing during and after the Second World War, mainly in Britain. These factory ships enabled whalers to reach previously unreachable waters and opened up the massive stocks of whales in the Southern Ocean to exploitation. By the mid-20th century, most species of large whales were being rapidly pushed towards extinction. After a lengthy battle, the International Whaling Commission voted in 1982 to ban commercial whaling, a ban which came into effect in 1986. Since then, while many species and populations have rebounded, many others have not. There is still some whaling done by a few countries. Several of the species hunted by these countries are in grave danger of disappearing entirely. If you're interested, here are a couple of websites that help save the whales. So the next time you think you're having a bad day at work, just think of the whalers of the 1800s and what they had to go through to make a buck. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Please subscribe for more historical videos. Take care.